Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Mayer, and I serve as the Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to the Texas Transfer Advisory Committee, or TTAC, and I especially want to welcome our new members to the subcommittee. I know we've got a couple of new faces and just excited for you all to be a part of this committee moving forward. So before we begin, I also want to let you know that this meeting is taking place via video conference and is also being broadcast via the internet. And I also would like to ask everyone to please observe the following etiquette. If you could please state your name before speaking, mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and keep background noise to a minimum. And then I also, before we jump in here, I just wanted to let everyone know once again, express the appreciation that we have for your time as members of this committee or members of the subcommittee. Particularly on behalf of Commissioner Keller, to each of the members of the Texas Transfer Advisory Committee for your commitment to this important work. So let me also say how much we also appreciate the institutions that each of you represent for supporting your time and effort on this advisory committee. It is certainly not lost on any of us here at the coordinating board how busy you all are back at your respective campuses. So your presence here today is appreciated. We're making great progress, as many of you know, on the fields of study. I counted up so far, we have had over 400 faculty who have participated on one of these subcommittees so far. So today's agenda is focused on your consideration of the communications field of study. And in addition, you'll hear an update on the English field of study. We also will consider action to recommend an alternative transfer framework and establish potentially subcommittees or meta-major for the meta-major fields of study, and we'll have a conversation about that later. So before we move on to the next agenda item, I want to take this opportunity to reintroduce our two co-chairs who will be leading us through today's agenda. So Dr. James Hallmark serves as the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the Texas A&M University System. And then Dr. Laura Williamson, who serves as the Deputy Chancellor and College President for San Jacinto College. Many of you likely know both of our co-chairs. They're well known and respected by their peers across the state, along with many others. And James and Laurel have already provided countless hours over the last few years developing and now implementing the Texas Transfer Framework. So now I am going to hand it over to Dr. Hallmark so he can take roll of the TTAC members and declare quorum present.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good afternoon, everyone. Members will begin the call to ensure that we have a quorum. When I call your name, please respond that you are on the call by simply saying here or present. And it'll be a good opportunity for you members joining us by Zoom to practice hitting your unmute button for our discussion later in the agenda. I'll start with those who are representing four-year universities. And when I mispronounce your name, notice I didn't say if, but when I mispronounce your name, please correct me and I'll make note here and probably will mispronounce it next time also. Melissa Becker from Tarleton State University.
Present.
David Benz from Houston Clear Lake. David Benz. Canberra Bulch, Texas State University.
Present.
Sarah Bowden, UT Tyler.
Present.
Susan DeGeese, A&M Corpus Christi.
Susan DeGeese, present.
Thank you, Susan. Shannon Goodman, UNT.
Present.
Ann Kinnemer, Texas A&M. Mitzi Lauderdale, Texas Tech.
Present.
Cindy Mejia, University of Houston. Cindy?
I think she was the one that was going to be absent.
Okay. Arturo Montoya, UT San Antonio.
Present.
Laura Sines, UT RGV. Laura? Yeah. Serving as ex officio members, Alvin Johnson from Prairie View A&M.
Present.
Emil Brown, student at UT Austin. Emil on? Yep. From TTAC representatives from community colleges, Gary Evans from Collin College.
Present.
Andrea Foskett from Central Texas College.
Present. Andrea Foskett.
Andrea Foskett.
Foskett. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Andrea. Norma Hatcher, Laredo College.
Present.
Max Hibbs, Lynn College.
Present.
Fred Hills, McLennan Community College.
Present.
Angelica Gomez Johnson, Del Mar College. Angelica. Marnouche Motamedi, Odessa College.
Present, and my last name has been changed, so I can update you later formally with another email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Melinda Mejia, Houston Community College. Melinda. Catherine Oliveira, Dallas College.
Present.
Edith Orozco, Phillips College, St. Philip's College.
Present.
Galen Scott, Austin Community College.
Present.
And serving as ex officio members, Gracie Martinez, Del Mar College. And Kareem Grar, Austin Community College. I didn't hear Gracie or Kareem. Okay. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, because I believe we have to have 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we do the community
Okay,
comments.
we do have a quorum. So thank you, members, and we'll record in the summary notes that we do have a quorum. Members, as Elizabeth said earlier, to ensure we comply with the Texas Open Meetings requirements and to assure we maintain a quorum, please keep your cameras turned on for the duration of the meeting. I'd now like to move to agenda item 2, which is adoption of the summary notes. That meeting occurred
April
April 3rd, 2023.
April 13th. Yes.
It's April 13th. Thank you. And those summary notes were sent out in advance of this meeting. Do I have a motion to adopt the April 13th summary notes for the Transfer Advisory Committee?
Melissa Becker, so moved.
Thank you, Melissa. Do I have a second?
This is Galen Scott, second.
Galen. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye all at once.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. And now I'll turn things over to Dr. Williamson to move us to the next agenda item.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Next on the agenda is a presentation and possible action to recommend the communications field of study curriculum. Now I'll turn things over to Courtney Brazil from Dallas College and Paul LeBlanc from the University of Texas, San Antonio. And the 2 TTAC members who served on this subcommittee were Galen Scott, Austin Community College, and Cameron Bolch, Texas State University. So Courtney and Paul, it's in your court.
We're pulling
All
up
right.
that PowerPoint.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I heard you say that you're working on getting the PowerPoint pulled up now, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I would sing or entertain you all, but that's not my lane, so I teach speech. But while she's getting that up, one of the things that me and my co-chair, Dr. Paul LeBlanc, wanted to do was just to briefly introduce ourselves. And so, as you have heard, my name is Courtney Brazil. I'm actually representing Dallas College. I've actually been teaching communication courses now. This is my 14th year. So I am very humbled and honored to be able to work on this subcommittee and to be able to share with you just some takeaways from our robust discussion. So Dr. LeBlanc, if you would like to just briefly introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Paul LeBlanc, and I'm from the University of Texas at San Antonio. I've been there since 2001, and I'm a professor in the Department of Communication.
And you can go ahead and move to slide 2.
For you.
Do you guys see that second slide with the subcommittee met?
No, I'm just seeing the first slide. I don't know if, I just see the first title slide.
There we go. So we met mid-October for 2 days. The first day we talked primarily about the field of study curriculum recommendations, both those that we intend to promote as part of the foundation courses and the directed electives, which we'll talk about in a minute. Our second day was spent primarily talking about the Texas core curriculum, but we represented many schools throughout Texas. We had a fairly equal representation of 2-year schools and 4-year schools. Some of those 4-year schools, of course, were master's and doctoral granting institutions. So we had fairly well represented groups. We also had members from your committee and members from the coordinating board staff with us.
Okay, and so as it relates to the field of study curriculum recommendations, we actually chose and came to a consensus as a committee, and we did not have a complete consensus, but I'll say the majority of consensus after we polled, which was to have these 4 discipline foundational courses. The first is Speech 1311, which is Introduction to Speech Communication, and that really serves as a survey course that really is a great wraparound course that really introduces students not only to public speaking, but conflict management skills, culture and communication, self and perception, looking at their own identities and how their level of self-esteem influences the way that they communicate. So the 1311 course is actually one of my favorite to teach. So it's always great to have that in our foundational courses for our transfer students. We also have 1315, which serves as a public speaking course for students, and we focus on those best practices and outlining. We also have 1318 in a personal communication that helps our students to really foster and build great interpersonal communication relationships amongst their peers, their family members, and whatnot, and also the importance of interpersonal communication within the workplace, which is a great transition to our 4th discipline-specific course, which we have Speech 1321, Business and Professional Communication, which also includes some opportunities for students to develop their best practices for communication, but also really looking at some of the conflict and the personal relationships and some of those things that happen within the professional setting into greater depth. One of the things that we did want to keep in mind as we chose 4 foundational courses was to ensure that we had courses that our community colleges would have. We do realize we had some discussion about possibly putting some kind of mass communication classes here. We had kind of bounced around the introduction to mass comm, but we really wanted to be sure that we focused on just some courses that we knew that regardless of budgets and sizes of our community colleges, that we would have these courses for students to be able to take without a problem. So again, we have the 1311, 1315, 1318, and 1321. And if you can go to the next slide, we'll have Paul come in and talk more about directed electives.
So as Courtney alluded to, we do have some schools that teach in the area of journalism and mass communication, and that includes 2-year schools and 4-year schools. And therein lies where much of our discussion fell. So for recommendations, we'd like to add these courses as non-binding recommendations, just courses that students could take as possible electives within the major. So, for example, at UTSA, students take courses within our major, but oftentimes they will transfer from another school, having taken courses that are in the fields of mass communication or journalism, which we don't currently offer. However, within our curriculum, we have electives that are allowed within the field of communication in general, which we accept as transfers. So our feeling was that we would be as inclusive as possible. And you might notice that some of those start with COMM as the call letters and SPCH as the call letters. It's an interesting, how might you say, artifact that communication has two different call letters for their disciplines, although they're fairly well represented within all the communication programs within the state. So our feeling was that if we provided for opportunities for students that were coming from programs that were more journalism or mass communication oriented within these directed electives, as well as communication studies or speech communication courses, it would allow more students to be able to transfer. Hence, that's why we included these. Next slide.
All right. So when we just look at the overview of the work that we did, it was really coming to a consensus on those 4 discipline foundation courses that I actually mentioned and described earlier. And then also the 6 directed elective courses that Paul just mentioned. When we asked the subcommittee whether just any significant changes that they would have or any concerns as it relates to the holistic core, we did not have much on that end. So our primary contributions were the 4 discipline-specific courses and those 6 directed electives.
Under the core curriculum requirements, there is the option for courses to be included, and my understanding is that that is decided upon at the institution basis. UTSA, as an example, has speech communication or public speaking as an option. So we felt as a group that there wasn't any desire among our members to have a course within the core proper. And our reasoning for that was to allow more flexibility for the transfer process. It is our hope that by being more flexible and inclusive in that regard, that will actually increase the number of transfers.
Thank you for that, Paul. You can move to the next slide. So this is actually our thank you slide. So again, I want to just tell you thank you for the opportunity to be able to serve, and that myself as well as Dr. LeBlanc, we want to continue to do meaningful and deep work as it relates to preparing our students in the classroom, and also very importantly here at the community college, preparing them to transition on to our 4-year institution. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, and please feel free to ask us any questions that you feel necessary at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That was really good. And I agree with you. Great work for our students. That's what we keep at the center of our conversation. So thank you and all the people who worked on this. So do we have, the floor is open for discussion. Any questions or comments?
Laurel, this is this is James Hallmark. Just a question for Courtney. You said when mentioning the discipline foundation courses that there was not unanimous, but you did vote. I'm curious, what were the variables you discussed? And nothing specific to communication. I've asked this question to each group that's come along. Is what were some of the issues that were discussed in coming to the conclusion that you have these 4?
Yes, so that is a very excellent question. One of the things that we had some differences on, and Paula actually alluded to that, is we have some people that the way that the programs are structured are a little bit different at different schools. For example, I have my bachelor's and master's from the University of North Texas. At UNT, we have communication studies, which is separate from our School of Journalism, which is separate from the radio, television, and film. And so you had some people who have come from the background of communication studies like myself. And so they had some concern about putting intro to mass comm actually in there. They wanted to stick more with the communication studies type courses. And so your communication studies type courses are going to be more interpersonal, conflict management, health and communication, all those different things that really encompass the realm of human communication, but not really going into the journalism and mass. And so there were actually some differences on that. Some people felt as if we needed to kind of have more of a blended approach by having some of the communications, like mass communications type courses, blended with some of those communication studies within the foundational course. And then we also had a number of people who felt that we needed to stick with more of the communication studies. So that is really, I would say, where some of the differences really kind of fell. And so we actually did a lot of discussion back and forth. And one of the things that Paul and I did was when people actually propose courses, we wanted you to share the course that you were proposing and specifically share with us why do you believe that it should be a foundational course or even a directed elective. And more specifically, why do you think that's important that a student would take that particular class as it relates to them transferring? Because we wanted to ensure that we brought our conversation back to what we were here to do, and that is thinking about what other courses that students need as they transfer on to our four-year institutions. And so after doing a poll and some robust discussion, we ended up with those 4 foundational courses for the field of study for speech communication.
Right. Which is also why our recommended courses cover both those two sides of the coin, the mass comm journalism, as well as the speech comm. So it was our hope that if we could be inclusive that way, we discovered that the majority of the 2-year schools do not do mass comm and journalism. They do speech comm stuff. And it was felt among the group as a whole that in order to include everyone, if we at least had the opportunity for schools to send their students with courses in mass comm, that they could have those transfers done. And that's why they're in the recommended list.
Thank you.
That help, James?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Good decision making. All right, other questions or comments?
This is Galen Scott. I was the community college rep on this group, and I just wanted to say it was great fun to hear passionate, committed faculty members in the communications field wrestle with difficult questions, and they did it well, and they came to a good resolution. So I appreciated the collegiality and the commitment that was exhibited throughout.
Thank you for those kind words. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Other comments or questions? All right, we need a motion and a second from both the university representatives and the community college representatives. So I'm going to ask for a motion and second from the university members.
This is Canberra Balch. I move to accept.
All right, thank you, Canberra. Have a second?
Melissa Becker, second.
Thank you. All right. A motion and a second from the community college representatives.
This is Galen Scott. I move to accept.
And I'll follow Galen with a second. This is Freddie.
Thank you. All right. So we will do vote by a roll call, and we will need a 2/3 majority of those present and voting needed from both the university representatives and the community college representatives. So we will begin. Let's see here. All right,
May I
and
ask
please,
May I ask a quick question?
certainly.
Courtney and I, are we supposed to vote or not vote? We're not on the committee. We're just the rep.
No, sir.
No,
Okay.
sir.
no, sir. It's the representatives of the TTAC committee itself. All
Okay,
right,
thank you.
thank you. We would assume that you would vote yes. So, maybe. Okay. All right, our 4-year partners, please respond yes or no. Melissa Becker,
Yes.
David Benz, Camera Bulch,
Yes.
Sarah Bowden,
Yes.
Susan DeGise,
Yes.
Shannon Goodman,
Yes.
and Kennemer. And I know we had
Yes.
some people here, but I'm just gonna go through in case somebody joined late. Mitzi Lauderdale,
Yes.
Cindy Mejia, Alberto Montoya.
It'll be Arturo Montoya. Is that what you meant?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Arturo Montoya,
It would be a yes. Yeah, thank you.
Laura Sines, James Hallmark.
I'm voting yes. I will say, I believe we missed Ann Kinnemer. I believe she is on.
No, I got her. I heard
You got
her.
her?
Okay.
Want to make sure we didn't miss someone.
All right, that's easily 2/3. All right, and so for our community colleges, Gary Evans,
Yes.
Andrea Foskett,
Yes.
Norma Hachar,
Yes.
Max Hibbs,
Yeah.
Fred Hills,
Yes.
Angelica Gomez Johnson, Marnouche Montemedi, which may be Marnouche Weems now.
Yes, and yes, this is Marnouche Mims. Thank you.
Thank you. Melinda Mejia, Catherine Oliveras,
Yes.
Edith Orozco,
Yes.
Galen Scott,
Yes.
and I vote yes. We have 2/3. All right, I'll turn it over to James.
Thank you, Laurel. Next on the agenda is an update on the English field of study curriculum. I'll turn things over to Sharon Prince from Wharton County Junior College and Nell Sullivan from the University of Houston downtown. And the TTAC members who served on this subcommittee were Melinda Mejia from Houston Community College and Laura Sines from UTRGV. Sharon and Nell, take it away.
We'll introduce ourselves first. I'm Nell Sullivan. I'm a professor of English at the University of Houston downtown, where I have taught since the early 1990s.
I'm Sharon Prince. I teach at Wharton County Junior College, and I've been here for a long time too. And ours is a little different from what the communication program said. We're asking for an alternative framework because the field of the core complete students haven't always taken their 2000 level language courses. So we had different recommendations with regard to the language requirement for the BA. With regard to the literature classes, we're pretty open to the classes that students choose to take at each school. Okay. Nell, I guess you're up now.
Yeah. We were hoping within the alternative framework to have a menu of allow students to choose from a
Oh, she
menu of the
froze. Okay, I'll just take over.
am
So
I
as
frozen?
you can see here, we have the 2000 levels,
She's
and
not
those are
frozen.
fairly consistent
I'm
across
sorry.
schools.
I don't think I was frozen, Sharon. Was I frozen, guys?
No,
No.
I could see you, hear you.
I think it might be an issue on Sharon's end because she seems to be frozen now. Okay, so just quickly, we met in April, so we were a little bit further back. So I'm sorry if we're not as fresh, but the big points of contention here were we were hoping to get an alternative framework. So first off, we could have a menu of choices at the lower division, so it would give students more choices of those sophomore literature courses instead of mandating either a British or an American. They could have more of a menu of choices so that more actually would transfer in, but also one of the issues was the sort of downward pressure on community colleges that it would sort of wipe out certain offerings at the community college if we were saying we're privileging American or we're privileging British. The biggest sticky wicket was the lower division language requirements, because all of us seemed to require some, but there were different levels. A couple of universities required 4 semesters of a foreign language. And if we didn't get the alternative framework, that would create a situation where they would have to completely alter their priorities. But even for those of us who only required 2 semesters, for some students, that would be a sort of issue if they came in with the 60 hours. I would point out, and this is not in our memo, but for at least at my university, many of our students don't find the foreign language requirement that daunting, because they can take the CLEP or their heritage speakers and they can place out of those courses. But for students who are not, or who want to take a different language than Spanish, and for the universities that require more than 2 semesters of foreign language, it was going to be a big issue. And I know that the emphasis here is to try to make students get through the degree plan a little bit more efficiently, but we also want to make sure, and one of our concerns was to make Texas universities be competitive with other universities. And the language requirement has been such a traditional part of this. And I know the legislature doesn't want to hear the word traditional, but it would really, we felt, not be a good thing to cut out that requirement from the BA in English or English related fields. And Sharon, are you back?
I am, thankfully. Thought you had frozen, but I must have. All right, so I'm assuming you took care of everything while I was gone.
May I ask a question of the group? We were led to believe that it would be a possibility for us to get the alternative framework to allow the foreign language requirements and to give more choices than just specifying American Lit or British Lit. Is that a possibility, or are we going to have to go back to the drawing board?
Laurel, do you want to answer or do you want me to answer?
Well, I think that we are going to take action on that, possible action on doing that, opening that up for the alternative framework. We have other areas that have requested the same thing, and we have very generously and with good spirit said, yes, we need to look at this differently, because it's not, everything is not one size fits all. So yes, and we're going to talk about that on the agenda. Is that good, Elizabeth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
James?
Yeah, let me ask a question of of all the English professors on the screen, but particularly Sharon and Nell, since they were the co-chairs of this. Are the English programs all Bachelor of Arts, or some of them Bachelor of Science? Are they all Bachelor of Arts?
At my institution, and those of us who met, the BA in English is mostly, or the English degree is mostly BA, but at my university, we also have a technical communications degree, which comes out of the English department. And I think several universities have a TCOM degree or a version of that, technical writing. And that's a BS degree, and they don't require the foreign language, ironically, even though there would be definite benefits in technical communication to having that kind of linguistic flexibility. But no, those are BS degrees. But Sharon can correct me. I don't think any of our English majors were anything other than bachelors of arts.
I would think, yes, mostly Bachelor of Arts. Yes.
The reason I ask has to do with the university level requirement. If it's a university level requirement that a Bachelor of Arts requires foreign language, then that would solve our problem, at least at some level, of the foreign language requirement. Now, it wouldn't solve the 2-year versus 1-year kind of question. And if you had an option for an English degree, not the technical com, but an English degree that was Bachelor of Science, then that wouldn't solve it. If the program was specifying you got to have foreign language, then that does not solve our foreign language problem. If the university is saying that Bachelor of Arts requires foreign language, then as I understand the rule.
Yes,
As I understand the rule, that means that we can require the foreign language, even though it's not part of the field of study block.
Mitzi has her hand up.
Yeah. Mitzi has her hand up.
Yes, Mitzi Lauderdale here. I served on as the TTAC member for the history group for field of study. And this came up, and I think the question that group asked was, well, what if it is a college level? Like, so a group within, and the answer was no, that requirement would not fix the problem because it's not an institutional requirement. And there were quite a few people on that call that it was a college level requirement, not an institutional level requirement. Just wanted to pass that along.
I have a question. What does that mean? Do you mean like College of Arts and Sciences only?
Correct.
So, but I mean, I don't know, but graduated a long time ago, but it would seem to me that BAs in general require literature. Is that not true? I mean, language, because even my daughter went to Tech. She got a BA in math of all things, but she had to take 12 hours of Spanish.
That was an arts and sciences requirement, and really a program requirement more than arts and sciences. But there, I think the college has the requirement, and then there are a few exceptions within the college. But there are other BAs across campus that do not require it, and that was consistent in the history field of study group, not just at Texas Tech. That it was all over the board at institutions of where that requirement sits.
I mean, to me, as a community college person, it seems that pushes it back to us, which is fine. We would grow our foreign language programs tremendously if the students needed to take the foreign language here. But we can't possibly have a level of options. Like, you know, my future son-in-law took Chinese, right, at Tech. And so it's interesting because that's all I've got to say there, I guess, because a BA without a foreign language is fascinating to me, but I got my BA quite a while ago.
And again, this was back in April, so you're going to have to forgive me. I cannot remember which institution it was, and maybe somebody here can fill this in, but there was actually one member in our group whose institution had that requirement for the BA. I want to say University of North Texas, but please forgive me. It's been 7 months, and I'm not as young as I used to be. So if I didn't write it in my notes, I don't remember that detail. But there was at least one institution that had the requirement.
You mean as a whole now?
Yeah. But that would only solve the problem for that particular institution. Is that correct? Because that would be outside of the field of study. That would be a university requirement. Correct. Okay. So for the rest of us, it wouldn't. And I'm trying to remember which institution. Was it Texas Women's that required 4 semesters? Well, there were actually a couple that required 4 semesters of the same foreign language.
Variation.
It's not consistent.
That's what we offer here, you know, because that's considered relatively standard that students need freshman and sophomore.
Right. And you offer it, but you don't require it. And
we do not, but we could.
Okay.
I mean, if that, or at least strongly recommend to students, I mean, that would require us to go to like CIR to look at core and what we have in the core. I think at one point we had the sophomore level Spanishes in the core, but when the core went to 60 hours, we no longer did. So it would be a process to get the second year classes required, but it could be done, especially if it were the case that in order for students at our class, our school to be core complete in English, which also it sounds like in some other liberal arts, then it wouldn't be that hard to get it in. I mean, hard, not easy, obviously, but it wouldn't be that hard to get it into the core.
It would be very difficult here since foreign language is not, it's an option in the core, but it's not required. It would be very, very difficult at our institution to make that change.
I mean, it would be in, I don't have all the numbers, but it would be in, the language, philosophy, and culture requirement, right? And so it would be an option. Like we have lists of things that are option in each, core one, core two, things like that.
Let me rein this back in. This is an important discussion, but one that probably needs to occur in the continuation of an effort as we look at the alternative framework and as English continues to work through how this will be done. Are there additional broad comments as opposed to solving the problem? Or is there additional broader comments on the current status of the English field of study and the request to have it look at it in the alternative framework, which again is a later agenda item. So we're not debating whether we'll have an alternative framework at the moment, but just discussion. Any more questions about the English field of study update? Okay. Thank you, Sharon and Nell. We'll kind of be taking this back up here in a moment when we talk about the alternative framework, and I'll hand it over to Laurel to continue on to agenda item 5.
All right, so next on the agenda, we have a presentation and possible action to recommend the alternative framework for transfer. I would just like to say that for me, all good systems are flexible and not rigid, and so I think our inclusion of an alternate framework is exactly what we need to be doing to serve our students effectively. And so, and this is not, again, the first discipline area where we have had to look at things a little differently than when we started out, and that is for the good of the order and for the good of the students. So I'm going to turn things over to Elizabeth now and the work group members to present why we want the alternative framework.
Thank you. For those that were on the committee in December of last year, the TTAC members agreed to convene a work group to evaluate the possibility of developing an alternative framework for disciplines that currently don't fit within the framework. So the charge was really to explore the possibility of developing an alternative transfer framework that allows for more flexibility for disciplines that may require less than the 42 semester credit hours of the Texas core curriculum and require more than the 18 semester credit hours of those lower division. And this is based upon how the current framework was developed. And, we spent 25 meetings, 9 months with a work group to develop the framework that had 5 members of community colleges, 5 members of universities. Laurel and James were on there, as well as Ann Kennemar and Fred Hills. So just want to make sure that everybody understands developing the regular framework was a very long, complex process. And every time I have an opportunity, I thank people for that hard work, because it was 90 minutes every week for months to kind of go through the challenges and be really open with each other about what was working and what was not working. But to Laurel's point, we understood that there likely would be friction points that we would need to circle back around to. So want to thank those work group members who participated in the alternative framework recommendations, which is Laura Sines from RGV, Max Hibbs from Blinn, Timothy Yoon, who actually rotated off from UTSA, and Melissa Becker from Tarleton. So we had a handful of meetings going back to the spring and meeting through the summer to work through this. So we really wanted to look at developing a framework that would still fit in an associate's degree, but also wanted to think through those barriers that existed. We had a couple of these disciplines that we had run through that it wasn't going to work for, such as biology. So when we started working through this, the ones that we looked at were mechanical engineering, English, biology, and music. We thought those gave a pretty wide swath of disciplines where there would potentially be friction. And so we worked on that. And in your packet, there was also, I think, a letter from the Music Association and some of the thoughts that they would like to have a field of study. And as you all know, that is a decision of this group, but it would likely be with some kind of alternative framework that the framework that we currently have, music would likely not fit. So after several of these meetings and review and discussion of degree plans, what we have recommended is instead of doing the full 42-hour core, that for these disciplines, there would be 30 semester credit hours of the core curriculum and then 30 semester credit hours of the discipline. So this framework would consist of discipline foundation courses of up to 24 hours, but at least 18 semester credit hours. And then those directed electives that are selected by our four-year partners would be up to 12 semester credit hours. So that's how you would get the 30. So this also involved a lot of discussion. We looked at a lot of degree plans, and I would just invite any members of that work group if you want to weigh in as well. But we spent a lot of time looking at everybody's degree plans and curriculum and trying to think through what's going to make the most sense, considering some of these existing disciplines where we've had some challenges. So I'm just going to pause and see if any of the work group members would like to add anything to what I've provided. Laura or Melissa or Max?
Max, I think you did a very good job of summarizing the work that we did and the decisions that we agreed to.
Agreed.
And I wasn't on the work group, but I'd like to comment that it's not unusual in other states that have a transfer framework that they have something in the state, whereas before we called it an upside down degree, meaning really that part of the core, the required core was done at the community college, but part was done after transfer, so that the 60 credit hours were not core complete upon transfer, but occurred after transfer. So I think it's a good method to address some discipline differences as we move forward. Any other questions or discussion on this point? All right, so do we, Ann?
Yeah, I was about to say, actually, go ahead, Ann.
I remember there being a lot of concern about moving some of the core curriculum courses into the upper division, and that there was kind of a prohibition on four-year schools requiring lower division coursework after a student had completed one of these transfer pathways. Has that requirement changed, or are we proposing that there be some modification to that?
So what we're proposing is that when
or am I remembering incorrectly?
I think that was part of the discussion, but the proposal in front of you now is that upon transfer, they could still take those lower division courses. It would not require anyone moving those courses up to upper division. It's just the statute says that you cannot take other lower division courses, but since they wouldn't be field of study complete, it would give that flexibility upon transfer, taking those other lower division courses.
They wouldn't be field of study complete, but aren't we creating fields of study?
No, they would still be considered field of study complete, but with this alternative framework, they would not have completed all of the core. So they could still go and take the rest of the core as because we're designing the field of study, acknowledging that they're not going to have the full 42 semester credit hours upon transfer. It'd be a 60-hour degree, but 30 and 30.
Okay. Okay, so they're field of study complete, but they're not core complete.
Yes.
Which leaves the door open.
Yes, and it gives us more room in the field of study to do the lower division. Yes.
And while you're
Makes sense.
an open
Thank you.
I'm curious what engineering views this, given your expertise. Because this is one of the reasons we needed this alternative framework was to satisfy needs in engineering, among others.
And of course, I don't have this open on my computer right now. I think.
Pardon me, well, we had a comment that in the original fields of study, and I think Fred put this in the chat, in the original fields of study, we did allow this in engineering and music. Music has always been problematic in terms of trying to take all of those courses and then packing in the 42 hours for the core. So that has always been allowed, and now we are just broadening that perspective to see what other disciplines this needs to occur for. And I think originally Sharon had her hand up too.
Yeah, I'm sort of concerned about, mainly this would require, I think, a catalog change at my level so that students wouldn't think they were no longer going to have to take sophomore level courses or, freshmen as well when they leave here. And so that's what I'm thinking would be the solution on my side, is to let students know if you don't want to have to take under whatever, I'm kind of losing words here, but the freshman and sophomore classes at the next institution, you got to take them here, or that you can be required to take them there. Correct?
Yes, and I think that our agreement was this will be very well published in both the university and the community college catalog, on the websites, anywhere where you would publish that information, and students would be fully informed about what the pathway looks like and what's required at the community college and what's required upon transfer.
Yeah, like just as being on the community college side, like students take their courses here in large part to save money. So, 12 hours that, yes, transfer, but don't, finish out their freshman and sophomore would be frustrating for them for sure. So yeah, good publication would be good.
But it is not adding any hours to the total hours of degree. So they are still paying for the same number of credit hours. It is only distributing the core curriculum requirements differently. So I agree. Many students come to the community college for cost savings, but that would not be affected.
This is Canberra Balch from Texas State. As we think about this from the global level, it might be wise for us to think about some language that we could share with all institutions so that it is clear when someone comes field of study complete exactly what that would mean for a student under each of these circumstances. So whether that's up to this committee or whether that would come out of the coordinating board at that higher level, I think it would be very good to have some assistance for institutions so that they would publish the right thing. And from the advising perspective, it could be very clear. Field of study complete in this particular field means this, whereas field of study complete, if you're following one of the traditional, the new traditional versions, you are core complete as well as being field of study complete.
And just for clarification for everybody, depending on what this committee decides, we get to go through the joy of rulemaking. So this is a decision by the group, and then we get to go through this rulemaking process which will take 6 months, and also involves a public comment period. And as I tell anyone, I have a lot of rules that are out for review. You please comment, even if it's yes, we agree. Even if it's, these are all of the problems, like we cannot fix things we do not know about. So this is what happened with transfer. We did the program approval rules last October. It's the same thing. So this will still has a bit of a long roadway, but this was kind of the first step. And I'm going to pause there because I know Dr. Foskett, I think, has had her hand up for a minute, and I want to pause and give it back to Laurel and James, but just wanted to provide that clarity that this is not going to flip on a dime, guys. Like, this is going to be a bit of a roadway.
Well, and I think that our discussion is important because we want to be sure that we are making good recommendations that have taken all of these factors into consideration. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Foskett.
Well, thank you so much. Just a brief comment. I served on the TTAC subcommittee for biology back in August of 2022. So it's been a while since we had that discussion, but I do remember it was a very, very lively discussion, and when we struggled as a group to come to any kind of consensus, especially because we really struggled with the idea that we had lecture and lab components, and a lot of our classes were 4 credit hour classes. So it was really limiting our ability to add more BIOL prefixed courses within the foundation and the directed electives. And so this idea of the alternative framework, and thank you so much to the work group members for working so diligently in offering us other options, which really would make it so much easier for certain disciplines, especially biology. And I think I was looking at the structure that you all had or that you all are proposing, and I think this is so much more ideal to cut back on the core curriculum and add more flexibility to the number of courses that we could offer in the discipline foundation courses. So thank you very much. And I do recognize if you're gonna go with an alternative framework, yes, the language would be very important so that it is consistent and everybody understands that field of study complete, I guess, in one field of study is going to look a little different, and also make sure that there's no confusion for our students. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I have one question, Laurel, if I may. When we vote regarding the alternative framework, I'm curious what we're voting on.
So we're voting to move it forward. So we have to go through this rulemaking process. So we will be working with our Office of General Counsel, as we did when the prior group made their recommendations. So we will then go through that rulemaking process in developing rules for an alternative framework.
So it'd be a step in the process to creating an alternative framework.
Correct.
It would not be approving music, English.
Correct.
These are simply examples that may fit into that alternative framework, if indeed that comes to fruition.
Yes. So my recommendation, but leave it to you all to make this choice about how you would like to proceed, is move forward with the recommendation to go through the rulemaking process. After that rulemaking process is done in 6-ish months, come back and then go through and then have the committee approve what you would like to, I mean, like Dr. Foskett said, they would go through biology, I think, was waiting for an alternative. We had some that were put on hold. Engineering, we didn't even pull together nominations because we thought that it would likely need to go through this. Pull together English and then make that recommendation to pull them back together again to say, we now have this alternative framework, which can you all work through it as the subcommittee to see if you can now get there based upon this alternative. That is my recommendation.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
I think it's an important distinction. I want to make sure that's how I understood it.
Yes.
Want to make sure that
we're on the same page.
On the same page.
Yes.
So what we're doing is just recommending the alternative framework, and that we would have the list of disciplines that are going to go through that process once that is approved.
That we would develop the alternative framework rules and then come back and just confirm who you would like to have go through the develop a recommended field of study based upon the alternative.
Right. So any other comments or questions about the recommendation to move forward with the alternative transfer framework?
I do have a question just to better understand if it was in discussion or if this is a later phase of what is it that is recommended that would trigger an option for an alternative framework?
So I think that is going to be up to you all.
Okay.
And the discussion. I mean, what we typically have been doing is providing you guys the data of the highest enrollment and transfers. And we can do work on the front end if we think that there's going to be a challenge. I don't know if you all have a sense if the committee has a sense of what you think would cause problems, we can also look at the prior fields of study and look at the ones that had a high number of semester credit hours. Because honestly, those have been the ones that have had friction. To Fred's point that he put in the chat, you know, engineering and music, always a problem, right? So like, I don't know if when we make the vote of these are the ones that we would like to move forward on, if at that time you guys would make that call, say, well, we're pretty sure this is going to need to have an alternative framework, or say, give the subcommittee the latitude to say, try it this way. If it doesn't work, then try the alternative. Of course, all of this is like, I need to check with our lawyers, but that's how I would present it to you all is, will it fit? Or if for some reason we're a day in and it's just not going to work, maybe think about shifting. So does that help? I don't know if that helps or not.
It does. Thank you. Basically that we don't have to decide that now.
Correct. Correct.
I just didn't know if it had been discussed or if that was a part of this. So very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Other questions, comments? All right, I will need a motion and a second from both the groups to move this forward. And this is, we are a recommendation to move forward with an alternative transfer framework. And so from the university group, do I have a motion and a second?
Laura Science, a motion to approve. Move forward.
Thank you. And a second.
Mitzi Lauderdale, second.
Okay, thank you. From the community colleges.
Andrea Foskett, motion to approve.
You, second.
Gary.
Edith
Orozco.
Edith Orozco, second. Thank you. All right. So we'll have the roll call vote. We need a 2/3 approval from both groups. All right, please respond with yes or no when I call your name. Melissa Becker.
Yes.
David Benz. Canberra Bolch.
Yes.
Sarah Bowden.
Yes.
Susan DeGisi.
Yes.
Shannon Goodman. Yes. See the thumb. I'm seeing a thumb. Thumbs up. Ann Kennemer.
Yes.
Mitzi Lauderdale.
Yes.
Cindy Mejia. Arturo Montoya.
Yes.
Laura Sines.
Yes.
James Hallmark.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Gary Evans.
Yes.
Andrea Foskett.
Yes.
Norma Hajar.
Yes.
Max Hibbs.
Yes.
Fred Hills.
Yes.
Angelica Gomez Johnson. Marinush Motari Weems.
Yes.
Melinda Mejia. Catherine Olivares.
Yes.
Edith Orozco.
Yes.
Galen Scott.
Yes.
And Laura Williamson. Yes. I think we have the 2/3 we need from both groups. Thank you very much. A lively discussion and always appreciated. James?
Thank you, Laurel. We'll now move to a consideration and possible action on the establishment of a subcommittee or subcommittees on developing meta majors. And with that, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth Mayer again.
So in your packet, I sent material about what could be considered meta majors. So one of the challenges I think that we're continuing to face is having more and more dual credit students. And I think a lot of them don't know what they want to major in terms of like a precise major, right? Like, I know I want to do STEM. I know I want to do, I don't know, humanities, right? So we're trying to really give them some more options and clarity in terms of pathways. And so one of the things that we have looked at that we think might be helpful is really trying to figure out, should we consider doing some kind of meta major field of study for those that may not have that precise idea of exactly what they want to major in. So, you know, kind of open for discussion about how we may want to do this. Like I said, I broke it down into some buckets. I'm not saying those are the exact buckets. Or, you know, do you guys want to have established some kind of, subcommittees that would like look at, let's say, humanities communication, and then they would kind of figure out which specific ones. So open to ideas about how to do this. But I just think that, like I said, as we're having more and more students that may not have exact precision on that they want to major in history, but perhaps they want to do a humanities and communication major, meta major. And I think this, you know, something that we've talked about as well, that we talked about when I met with Laurel and James earlier today, is also trying to figure out how to align with endorsements and using language that is helpful, so that they can see the whole pathway, right? Because I think that is something that we still need to do some work on. So I'm going to open it up. James, I don't know if you want to start, or Laurel, but I just think that this is something that is going to take some work to probably determine how we're going to do it, but I think is something that is likely worthwhile.
Alvin, your hand is up, and so I'll let you start.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to comment that yes, this will definitely help dual credit students, but I promise you it will also help our normal age 18 and 19-year-old students who are studying within their freshman and sophomore year as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. I might mention Alvin is in advising, so he gets to see it in a frontline kind of capacity. You know, one of the things, I think this is worth exploring personally, just to bias the discussion, but certainly we want to have comments, whether you agree or disagree with exploring this. But there's so much overlap in the first couple of years in some areas, and to provide a path for students that still gives them some flexibility, but gives them an assurance that these hours will be applying to the degree as it moves forward to the four-year institution. You know, that's the goal, is to try to serve those students' needs as best we possibly can without messing them up. But there may be some downsides to it as well. And so this is an exploration kind of opportunity, and we want to hear from the committee as to what your thoughts are on this. Fred?
Yeah, I was going to say, I obviously the devil's always in the detail, but this lines up very nicely with the work community colleges are involved in across the state in the pathway movement. This is exactly what we've been trying to do for our students, and I'll argue 14-year-olds and 70-year-olds all fit in this category, trying to figure out what they need to do. So I think this lines up very nicely with the pathway movement. I bring that up because the pathway movement is already doing stuff in this area, so they would be a good source of information in that process.
Thanks, Fred. Canberra?
I think, you know, the devil was in the details was also on my tongue as well. So Fred took those words right out of my mouth. I think that the idea of aligning it with the endorsements is also one that would be of a lot of help to our K through 12 partners from the discussions that we have with them. A lot of times the student in those endorsements doesn't really know what those college level credits are going to look like. So I hope that if we do undertake this and we decide this is a direction to go, that we'll also move back and look at that alignment as well, so that it's seamless for the student.
Nancy?
I echo everything that has been said so far. The only new contribution would want to be for sure, we're thinking about the requirements on the four-year side, that I don't want a student to go into this thinking that they would have, for example, I look health sciences, there's 3 different majors maybe that are listed in that meta major group, that I think we need a clear understanding is, does an institution need to be able to apply it to one of each of those, or all of those. And I think that's the devil's in the details piece. And I just want communication and expectations to be managed very clearly for all involved, because I think it's a very important effort to take up. But I also think there's a risk of those details becoming problematic if it is a one-size-fits-all approach.
Excellent point. Thank you, Mitzi. Andrea?
So I think I'm understanding this, but if I did not, I apologize. But so are we saying we are going to guide students to select certain courses so that kind of helps them fit into a larger degree, like an associate's degree, for example? And I'm just curious, completion of this meta majors field of study courses, would this lead to a smaller, I don't know, a micro credentialing or something like that? Would this somehow fit into the whole talk of House Bill 8 and how funding works these days? I mean, I'm just trying to understand it. So if anybody could offer any clarification, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
I'll offer clarification that may just confuse the issue. But when a student's showing up in your shop, whether they're a 40-year-old returning for a degree or a 16-year-old in dual enrollment or whatever, they may not know that they want to be a physicist versus a mathematician versus an engineer, but they know they want to do something in that general area. So can we provide for them a structure that allows them to take the right courses that would give them the flexibility to choose amongst those as they became more clear in what it is that they wanted to major in? When they ultimately graduated from Central Texas College, it would be in a degree that you're offering. Maybe it's an associate's in mathematics or something, okay? But they would have that flexibility as they go up, because those courses, whether they're in engineering or mathematics or physics, just putting those three together, would be applicable to a certain extent. But there reaches a point in any degree program where it becomes more specific. But what are those overlapped courses there that do share?
Yeah, and we've talked about looking at the curriculum and seeing like how much overlap is there. And it may come to a point where what we think works, you have to throw it out when you actually look at it, right? Like there's just not enough overlap. And so I think the thinking is that there's, for some of these, there may be a fair amount of overlap, particularly at the lower division. But that's like, we haven't done the actual work to look at that. And this would be an effort to see if this makes sense, you know, and considering things like the endorsements and seeing like, does this work? Like I said, when I started, like, I don't know if these are the right buckets. I don't know if the things I put in there are the right things, but it's a starting point for the conversation.
Thank you so much for the clarification. But would there be possibly some kind of incentive for the students to complete these targeted courses so that actually is a bonus or kind of encourages them to go ahead and complete whatever the degree is that they ultimately might choose?
That is not a specific goal of this effort.
But I don't know any reason why your college would not look at that and say, hey, here's an opportunity for a micro credential of some kind for that particular student because of that combination of courses that they selected.
Thank you so much.
Catherine?
Thank you so much for the explanation. I think it kind of hits on where my questions lie. So what I'm really thinking about is the messaging to our students, because I see where the applicability of this for sure for dual credit students, particularly as it aligns with endorsements and allowing them an opportunity to have a more general kind of applicability for their coursework. In terms of the students who are coming in at our door, yes, those who are, whether they're 14 in dual credit or 40 or over and coming in as an adult, I guess my concern is the differentiation between this and the meta major field of study and the actual fields of studies that are created in discipline specific areas, particularly for those students who might have questions about, well, what's the difference between this one and this one and that one, and how are we taking up messaging? Ultimately, the colleges will be responsible for their own messaging purposes, but I think having a strong understanding and just overall definition, clear defined ways in which this is applicable for institutions, particularly in transfer, is going to be helpful, because to me, what it sounds like is basically not really, it's kind of getting away from the general AA or general AS and really giving them more of for students who are still undecided or unsure about what they want to do, giving them more structure so that way they have a place to land when they transfer. But ultimately, we know that students who do the fields of study, if they're able to complete the field of study overall in that discipline specific area, given the rules and the nature of the transfer framework, would have that greater applicability. So I guess what everybody has said before, the devil being in the details about that broad applicability of the field of study overall and these kind of general meta major areas, but then understanding what that messaging is going to be looking like and how we can have a coordinated effort in that regard.
Yeah, and I think we do want that applicability to happen. And if the student knows that they want to major in nursing, or they should complete a field of study in nursing, right? Like if they know, but I think this is more for the undeclared, folks that may not have that kind of precise, because I think we should be directing them to those more precise fields of study if one exists. But I think this is more broad strokes for those students who may not.
Alvin?
And this kind of goes back to what Catherine was just saying, but I was thinking about those dual credit students again, and a lot of their decision making is informed by their parents. And I'm constantly having a battle between parents who have not had a college experience versus parents who have. And so this will also be helpful for parents, because I'm getting a lot of students who are not going to educational professionals or advisors or faculty to have this conversation. Sometimes they're having this conversation with their parents and they're making some choices that are not benefiting them. And so this framework assists parents because it's more approachable as well. And although I would like to encourage them, after you speak with your parent, speak to someone at an institution, that doesn't always happen. And right now, being the end of a lot of the students' first semester, we're having conversations of making changes because they have not had a successful semester, because they got bad information about what they were pursuing. And I can just see this being helpful with parents assisting their students at that global level before they start working with faculty and advisors and other people.
Gary?
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate all the comments that have been said. In many ways, I wish we had come to this earlier in the process before we had got to some of our discipline subcommittees and the recommendations they've already been made and what has been ultimately approved. I do want to caution, though, that and going back to some of the earlier comments about the overlap here, I'm not certain that the overlap will be there in some of these cases, although I definitely think that it's worth exploring.
Thank you, Gary. Fred?
Well, we've been talking about the dual credit. One of the whole purposes of the meta major is helping the students recommending the math courses that they might need in the STEM area, or the science courses they may need in the science. So if they do change their minds, which, by the way, our students change their minds quite a bit, they're not losing traction, they're not losing ground as they move forward. And then ultimate goal, and we have people like Alvin out there steering them in the right direction, get them into the right areas that they're in. The communication is going to be key, but I think the process is putting up not the guardrails, but some sort of a guidance to help them make those decisions. Because so many of our students, and I'd say both 2 and 4 year, think they know what they're doing, until they get there. And then this helps those who change their mind. So I think it's good, but as I mentioned, there'll be some work on this one. So good to see.
Fred? Seeing no other hands raised, are we ready for a motion in a second? If so, I would entertain a motion from, we'll start with the 4-year.
Let me clarify what our motion.
Sure.
Do you all want to start with the specific group to say, see if you can make this work? Do you want to start with just a group of people, kind of like we did the alternative framework work group, which they kind of figure out the structure and then come back? So I just want to be clear, if you're going to do a specific group, having thought about this for 30 seconds, I would recommend maybe social and behavioral sciences or business. But I'm open to however you all want to do it. I just want to make sure we're clear about how you would like to move forward and if there are preferences, or we could do some curricular work and then come back to the group in the spring.
I was pondering whether this group could recommend that staff works on this.
I'm fine with that.
I'm going to propose that staff, I don't know the good language here, so somebody will have to wordsmith this, but that we would be charging staff with the responsibility of looking at existing field of studies where overlaps may occur, and then ultimately, oh, there we go. Fred said use AI to find commonalities. I'd really rather have staff sweat it out. Spreadsheets all over a table kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can do it that way where staff does kind of an initial pass of what, looking at the curriculum and come up with what might be the buckets and the individual items. What we may then do is figure out how to flip some of that back to you so we don't necessarily have to wait till the next meeting. And just say, based upon this, does this make sense? It would be helpful if there was a handful of you that I could send that to.
That's a very, very long proposal.
I know, sorry, guys.
The basic gist of this is that staff would make an initial run looking for where commonalities and overlap may occur. And a small working group would be formed to
review the material.
With staff so we can keep this going more quickly than waiting for the next meeting.
Yeah.
I know that's way too long, but is there understanding of what I just said? Good enough for us to vote on. There's no lawyers in the room, so.
And if we want to do like we did for the last work group, if you want to just send me your names for those that are free. I just want to have a handful of people who are know your degree programs well enough. We'll do a pass at a handful, but we'll want to also make sure that we haven't missed something.
Unless you're needing it, Elizabeth, I don't think we even need to vote on this. Because really what you've got is a sense of the discussion. You've got a task to follow up on. You're going to come back to a volunteer working group.
Right.
There would be no official action until a subsequent meeting.
Right.
When you or this working group came to the proposal.
Yes, sir. That sounds good.
Any objections to that?
No, but you might use Texas Success Center as sort of a resource because a great deal of work has already occurred on this at the community college level in terms of the pathways, and especially around dual credit.
Okay. That is helpful. And now we have clear direction.
Christine Bale and Martha Ellis and Cynthia Farrell.
Good. Yeah. And this means I don't have to read everybody's name to vote again. That was my primary objective in suggesting that.
Always, James.
I believe that wraps up the substantive components of the agenda. I will turn it over to Elizabeth for final comments and wrapping things up.
Yes. Okay. So in terms of communications, we will get that posted to the Texas Register for public comment, and that will be out likely in I typically don't do anything in December or January because everybody's doing their own thing. So we'll get that posted for public comment for 30 days. After the public comment period has finished up, if there's any substantive comments, we typically take that back to the co-chairs of the discipline and also your co-chairs of TTAC to see if they have any concerns. If not, we will move forward with collecting those directed electives via a survey instrument and move forward that way. And then in terms of the other agenda items, like I said, if you could please send your names if you're willing to at least review what we come up with in terms of the buckets of material for the meta majors discussion. And then I will begin working with our general counsel on developing rules for the alternative framework, which will likely take some time. We'll likely have an update for you all for the spring meeting because it takes so long. The earliest it could probably go is July to our board for review. So that's kind of the next steps for all of those things. But it's just, it's a long path, but it also gives an opportunity for multiple people to comment if there's things that we may have missed. And we actually find that very valuable. So when that is out for public comment, I will send it out to this group because we're really valuable your feedback, because as was said on a couple of the items today, the Deborah will be in those details. We've got to clean up on a couple of things that we've figured out as we've moved through just the framework in general. So look forward to your thoughts on these items as we're moving forward, and appreciate your partnership as always on the transfer work for the state. That's it. Yes, sir.
Very good. Are there any other closing comments before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Laurel, particularly, any comment from you as co-chair?
No, thank you very much for your time today.
Very good. Seeing none, I too thank you for your time today and your work, particularly those who have been working in these subcommittees, these working groups, whatever they're called, that have produced the work that we've discussed and voted on, and appreciate your continued work on these as we move forward. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Melissa Becker, so moved.
Thank you, Melissa. And is there a second?
Galen Scott, second.
Thank you, Galen. Everybody in favor, vote by turning off your screen. So thank you all very much. I hope your holiday season is wonderful, and we'll see you again after the first of the year.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.